Hi, I'm John Paul, and a really warm welcome back to my channel. And today, on this episode, I'm really delighted to have with me somebody called Dave Birchmore. He has made a career change. He actually, I think, contacted me on LinkedIn to talk about a book that you're writing, Dave, about people that have made career
Yep.
changes. That's something that you do now, is you help people navigate that career change. And I thought it'd be really helpful for you to come on the channel and just take us through, because you come up with this model called Via Nova, which is means new path, which is a way of navigating that potentially complicated process of moving from one career to another. And I thought, because quite a few people that watch the channel are thinking about that, of course, in the context of coming to becoming therapists, but and your model isn't specifically for therapists; it's for people generally making that career change. But I thought it would be helpful for people to hear anyway. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be able to join you just before Christmas. It's an absolute pleasure.
So, I mean, just to start, as I say, most people will be going from something to a career as a therapist, but coming up with the model and why you've done it. Could you just give a sort of potted history of things in your career, and then bring us up to date with
Absolutely.
coming up with the model?
So my career actually started what seems like a long time ago in healthcare. I qualified as a radiographer, and I think fairly early on I knew that that was not going to be a career that I would stay in forever and ever. But having gone to university, thought, stick at it. It's what I wanted. I wanted to be a doctor. That's kind of where it really all started. So very much kind of fell down that pathway of healthcare, and I wanted to help people, and I still do. So that bit's never changed. But having been in the healthcare system for some years, thought it was time to get out. Ended up in the industry side, in the corporate side. Some say the kind of the dark side of it, which was great, and I really enjoyed it. And very fortunately, I lived and worked abroad, traveled all over the world on someone else's dollar. So, I certainly can't complain about the career I had. But I think deep down, I always knew there was more to it. And then some years down the line, I found myself thinking there's more to this than just the general day-to-day grind. So I've worked in healthcare on and off all of that time. And then off the back of COVID, decided that it was time to actually make the move and quit a day job, 9 to 5, whatever you kind of want to do it, and pursue a side hustle. And by then, my wife and I had already started our cleaning company, which was going great guns. So I had to make the leap from full-time employment to self-employment and make the commitment to do one or the other. And self-employment and entrepreneurial ways kind of won. And here we are 4 or 5 years down the line. That company is still going, but kind of a sideline. And I've started Via Nova to really help people through that career transition, helping those who are stuck. I know you kind of understand that feeling, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching your channel also understand how that feels when you know there is more to be done, and you want to do something, but you're not really sure where to start. So what I do is help my clients move from wanting to do something to actually making that positive action and moving forward with a career transition, career change, and actually a lot of personal development in there as well. It's not just about work.
Sounds good. So how about the model then? What are the types of things that you think are important for people to think about?
Okay, so I have created what I'm calling a personal exit plan. And this is really based around the fact that we often hear about company exit. And, you build a company, and all these big corporate companies build and build and build, ready for an exit to sell, to make a lot of money. But actually, we don't really hear about that from a personal point of view. And actually, it's as important to do that for people as it is for companies, especially when you're feeling that there is something else that you want to be doing. And it's almost like they've built a career possibly on a fault line, because they have started a career that they feel is right, that they want to help, they want to do something. And that's where the problems start, because as time goes on, it feels very much as if there is just something that isn't right. And then it's about finding how to move through that and actually making those first steps. Because especially, again, with those kind of high pressure sort of careers, high value careers in society, it can feel quite shaming to leave. People say, why would you want to leave that career? Why would you want to stop being a doctor, a nurse, a radiographer? Why do you not want to be a teacher? There's such need for these people. But it actually comes down to that individual. So once they can overcome that, so Villanova is really there to help people create this personal exit plan that will help them take those actionable steps. And there's 7 steps to the process. That first step is looking at what I term value. And you'll notice as we go through these, I have each of the steps coincide or correspond with Villanova. So almost like an acrostic poem of sorts, I guess. There's nothing fancy about that at all. It just happened. And I thought, as I looked through it, I thought, oh, there's these 7 things, and it works quite nicely. So I just kind of worked on it, and I worked the words around it. And I think you alluded to in the introduction there that Villanova is Latin for new path. So again, that kind of, it seemed to work very well. So that first step is V, and I say that's for value. And really that's around value and skills. And that's looking at the person in an individual level and saying, what is it that you can do, or what is it you do on a day-to-day basis that builds a whole realm of skills that you may have that you could take into another career. And this is very important because, especially again, when people are stuck in a job or a career, they do things automatically on a day-to-day basis. And if you ask them, what transferable skills do you have? They are unlikely to be able to immediately reel off a whole load of things that could pass to another type of career. We sit down with them and we look through what it is that they can really do. The second step is then to imagine what they want their life to look like. How will it look in 12 months, 5 years, 10 years? And also a bit of reflection as well to say, do you want to be where you are in 5, 10 years' time? Because I think it's very important that people have that visualization. But I think it is important when people have a real strong think about what's down the line and, what does it really look like? If you're so unhappy in your job and your career, then you have to imagine what it looks like to be out of that.
Yeah, it's always quite a difficult one, I think, that, isn't it? Because it's quite difficult to imagine something you haven't experienced. I think that's one of the hardest things about this is, people moving from a corporate career into becoming a therapist, for example. They will have potentially had experience of therapy. They can do courses, that kind of thing, where they can see what something feels like and be around other therapists and that kind of thing. And people get more of a feel then for what it's going to be like, and can build up some energy to move towards it. But it is very difficult to take that risks and invest the cost and leave jobs when people don't know, in some ways, I would say, from my point of view, how good it will feel for that to be your full-time job. But I do think it's something that's difficult. It will be based on imagination, won't it? And other people's experience, potentially other people who can tell you what it was like for them. But it's a tough one.
Absolutely. And you're so right with that. And if, as you've just said, if you could make people feel and understand 5 years, 10 years down the line, how that is. And I think it takes, with so much in life anyway, to take a step back and look back in to then realize it wasn't for me. It wasn't until I kind of left London, left my corporate life, that my entrepreneurial side and the kind of another side really sort of shone through. I think it was always there, but it wasn't until I'd stepped away from it and looked back. So that's why I think it's important to get people imagining what it could be like. And for all of my steps, actually, and you touched on it again there, is talking to other people. So in every step, one of the tasks or 2 of the tasks maybe that they will get is speaking to someone else and seeking feedback. Because I think that's really important. And we can be our own worst critics. And actually, our closest friends and family are often as well our worst critics as well. So it's about seeking feedback from others who are maybe slightly impartial to it. And that's why having this process and having the ability to talk to others as well. And a sideline which we can touch on again is something I call pep talks, which is about sharing with others in a similar situation who are going through it, so you do not feel alone, because actually that's really hard, especially again in those key careers when you leave and someone says, why would you want to do that? You feel like it's just me. Maybe it's just me, I'm broken, or there's so much more to it. And I think that's key to share that. So I get them to sit down and write what it feels like in 12 months from a point. To imagine where they are, what they're doing, what a day looks like. Because my day looks very different now to how it did when I worked 9 to 5. And I think that's the crucial bit. And part of that, and it is the imagination, because as we've said, they can't feel it, is understanding what they want it to feel like. Do they want to take their children to school? And for me, that's a huge, huge part of why I do what I do, is that I want to take my children to school. And I don't really compromise on that very often. So is that what they want to do? Is it they want to travel more? Maybe they want to work abroad. So are they sitting, writing their diary, overlooking the English Riviera, the French Riviera, or doing something very, very different to where they are now? So that's the structure that I try and use, and pull in some different bits and pieces from that.
Sure.
And then the next bit, which is kind of the really big chunk and is hard for some people, is looking at the affordability. So obviously a big thing, if you are in a very high-powered job, and I can generally work with mid to high-level professionals who've had a lot of experience and maybe in quite a well-paid situation, they can't just quit. They might have a bit of money put away, but if you're used to a regular income, then you can't just switch that off.
Yes, that's always one of the biggest things when people are looking at becoming therapists as well, because they're also potentially going to private practice. So that is starting a business from one client. So it's not to diminish what it would be like to do that, not going from one job to a different job in a different industry. I mean, people can do that. They can be employed as therapists and therefore have certainty of what their salary might be, but largely they're looking at overtime starting practices as well. So money is always such an important thing, particularly if somebody was a lawyer or an accountant or whatever, works in a bank. So the salary, the lifestyle that they've developed is grown around that income. So it's often one of the top concerns for people, I think.
And understandable. And really, it takes such a lot to make that move. I think most of the fears that I hear really are around affordability. And how is it that it is possible to do that? So I sit with them and we talk not just about the money side, but about the practical side as well. And what does life look like? Again, that kind of leading on from the imagine bit. What does life look like when you have slightly less money or slightly less spending power?
Right.
And how do you move through that barrier? And again, it's easy when you've gone through it. Like you say, you will understand this as well. You have more than one client. So you've broken that barrier. Now you can look back and say, well, now I have these clients, I can understand that. But it's very daunting when you have that initial step. So it's about looking through that and understanding there'll be fluctuation. But what can you sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice? And that's a lot of it as well, is, okay, so you want to take your kids to school. That gives you this amount of hours in the day, depending on length of school. Can you fit clients in before, after, in the middle? And it depends what job you want to go to afterwards. Are you willing to stop having Costa prep every day? What is it that you're willing to sacrifice, and how many hours? And then it's about looking at what that affordability looks like and value as well. So when you work in a corporate structure, you work 9 to 5, supposedly, and you are very much based on your salary within a year, within a month. When you're self-employed, or when you work in an entrepreneurial way, you are valued in a very different way. Your hours and the time that you spend doesn't really correspond to the money you take. Ultimately, you may have less annual income, but the freedom, the power, energy that you have from being your own boss outweighs the 6-figure salary, if you are willing and able to make those changes.
people? How do people respond to well, I'm going to have to give up my coffee? Because again, it does go back to that imagination, doesn't it? I mean, it is a concept really to say working for yourself means you have freedom. It will be the thing that brings people into it, that concept, I think. We know that choice and working for ourselves probably in theory is going to feel good, unless somebody's had experience of that before anyway. But it does go back to that thing of you're imagining giving up something, what that will feel like, without necessarily knowing how good it's going to feel, that it's worth a lot more than a Costa. To have that sort of choice and freedom that day. So does it take a while from that point of view, because or it's just money's more complicated for people than other things?
Both. I think both. Lots of people may not have a budget, don't know how to budget, don't know how to look at figures.
Sure.
So there's that kind of working through it as well.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at that either. I'll kind of, I'll put that out there. That's one thing I have to work quite hard on.
Yeah.
And then you're right. Those other bits that are kind of, and again, it comes back to talking to other people who've done it, who's been there. That's why I'm writing the book, to understand that you're not alone. There are other people. And how do you get to understand that there is a point where there is back to that freedom, and you can have the holidays, you can have the life that you want to lead, but it just takes people a bit of time to get through that. Thankfully, most of the people that I talk to and deal with are already halfway there.
Okay.
The clients that I have are generally very positive about making action. And that's the big difference. It's not, I'm not talking to people who say, oh, I hate my job. That's fine. I will have conversations, but generally the people that I deal with and speak to are almost over that kind of ledge. So they've already thought about it. They've already thought about what life could look like, how they might afford it. They just don't really know quite how to make that final step. So it does take time, that affordability bit. And some people get their heads around it very quickly and easily. And the fact that it's fine, I'll get there and deal with it. And it depends on personalities. And you can look at, and you'll understand this as well. Anyone, lots of different personality traits, people who are very figure driven take a bit longer to try and work out and map exactly how those figures will work, how it adds up. I must earn this to earn that. Whereas other people, and I probably put myself in this category, we'll go for it and we'll work it out kind of as we go.
Yeah, I think I was a bit more like that. On therapy courses, for example, they don't do a lot on, well, they may do now, but when I trained, there wasn't a lot on money at all. So it's still another reason why people want to look at it and know about it. I just remember in my last kind of tutorial on the 4th year when I was qualifying, I said, oh gosh, I don't know about income. That would be the first time it was ever talked about. And a guy said, well, how much do you think you need to earn, the tutor, a year? And I said a number, and he said, okay, well, that number of clients times that annual rate equals that a week times 40, because you'll have that many holidays. That means you would have to charge your clients X and have that many clients a week. How does that sound? And that's thought, yeah, that sounds okay. And then it was over. But so but it probably would have been more helpful in some ways, because there's lots of budgeting things for starting a practice, and investment in websites and directories and all those kind of things, to think about that a bit more. But I was quite light on that myself, I have to say. But yeah,
and I think most people are. And if you look back at education, my wife and I talked about it this week, where the children are not learning those kind of some of those basic.
Completely.
Budgeting, mortgage, all those bits and pieces. And if you haven't ever learned that, when it comes through, and you talk then about websites, and yet starting a business, there's a whole lot of things that you just don't necessarily think about. And you have to take that into account. And it's about changing people's mindset to understand that that's the way. And I wonder, when you put down those numbers, when you said in year 4 of your course, were the numbers bigger than you expected? Would you have to have more clients than you expected? Or was it actually, that's fine and that works?
When you say bigger than I expected, what do you mean?
So,
The hourly
okay,
rate?
so was the hourly rate more than you kind of would expect?
No, no, it
Would you
felt.
need more clients to get to that hourly?
No, I mean, I was probably paying more in therapy at the time than that number than that
Right.
person said I would need to charge my clients. But of course, would have been newly
Yeah.
qualified, so it was about right for when I was starting. I didn't, I think it was on the basis of say 20 clients a week, something, and I thought, yeah, that sounds fine. But when you're actually doing it, you don't know what it's like to see 20 clients a week. That is because that's the other thing about working for yourself, particularly as therapists, of course. You have to work the hour to earn the money, don't you? And the other thing that you were saying about budgeting and that kind of thing, within an organisation, somebody else is paying the marketing budget, aren't they? Or even doing the account and doing the financing and all those, even the administrative tasks. But a lot of, you said, people were, paying for your flying around the world, so that cost falls to somebody else. But suddenly, it does all fall to you, doesn't it?
It falls on you, and as much exposure I think as you've had to that, like I say, someone paid for me to fly around. I put my expenses in. I got them back mostly. Some of the, your kind of coat got thrown out, but generally you get your money back. And I understood a lot of different functions at very high level around the business, but when it came to doing it myself and sitting down and understanding that actually I have to do everything, and there's lots of kind of the bigger well-known mentors out there who talk about putting an organizational chart together and putting yourself in all of them. And when you start a business, that is exactly what it feels like to be everything. Today I'm going to have my marketing hat on and then my sales hat, and all of that takes money. And back to the affordability bit, it's how do you then fit in those clients? If you need 20 clients a day or 20 clients a week, then when are you doing the rest of it?
Yeah.
Where do you fit it in? And I think within the affordability bit, again, it's looking at the overall kind of flow and what life looks like and how it feels. Because someone says to me, "Oh, what are you doing at the weekend?" Weekends actually, to me, sometimes are a complete blur because it's just another day. And I think sometimes when you're an entrepreneur and self-employed, you work whenever. There is no set time, and that's the mindset that has to change as well.
Sure.
And that's not to say I don't have a break, because I absolutely do, and I'm very strict on the breaks that I have and the time that I have with my family. But if my phone goes off or I get a specific email over the weekend, I'll answer it. It makes if I'm there, it's no bother.
I'm the same actually. Therapists of course talk a lot about boundaries and not working after particular times, but for me, I don't mind replying to a client query at 7 o'clock in the evening, or even if somebody sends an email on a Saturday afternoon, because it feels very different to me than when I was working in a law firm and a client sent an email. Then I probably would try, if I could, leave it till Monday. I felt more resentful potentially, but when it's your client, so to speak, and it's your business, that it is different. I think it does. Well, I found that it does feel different. I don't sort of resent out of hours work. It is, to me, I like it if I get a contact from a client. I mean, I don't mean any sort of detailed emails about things that would be unbounded and all that kind of thing. But I do think it feels different than correspondence that I would have got as a lawyer.
Absolutely,
on a Saturday afternoon.
And I think when you are the lawyer and you're receiving those emails and those messages, ultimately it's not for you. It's you're working on behalf of someone else.
Totally.
Whereas now, and I feel it, and I'm sure you feel it, when you get that, especially maybe it's a new inquiry, is that, here's a potential of a new customer. Right. That I know what that means. Oh, the marketing pipeline's working. All of those exciting things.
Sure.
That really kind of tick the box. And again, it's trying to get people to understand in that affordability bit that is all part of it. And yes, you may work longer hours, or there may not be an hourly rate per se, but it's well worth it in the end.
Yeah.
So that's the first three steps. And then 4, I've kind of called now what.
Okay.
And that really is, there is a division here where I'm happy that people go either way. And that is, I'm going to stick to what I'm doing. We've had these conversations. I'm happy. Actually, I can see there's just a bit more I need to do. Maybe I'm going to speak to my boss about that pay rise. about going on that course, doing something different, but within the career that I am in. Because actually we've had good conversations, I've spoken to others, and actually it doesn't really sound like it's for me. Or, right, this is it now. I think I can see a way forward, and I'm going to very much take this and let's go on to the next steps. We are fortunate to live in a world where you can start a business very easily, in theory, and you can get it. But I think that's, this is the stage where we really start to look at where do you want to go, what do you want to do, are there courses, therapist courses, trainings, who can you speak to now about moving forward to that next step?
Yes, I mean, the entrepreneurial thing is an interesting idea, because within therapy as well, of course, most people have in mind practical being a therapist in private practice most of their days, but there are so many different opportunities now for people who are trained as psychotherapists. It can be going into companies, of course, teaching, doing lots of different training, media work, even TV. All kinds of opportunities now, running their own therapy practices, employing other people, writing, and that can develop over time. Like you were saying, that most people will start with private practice or being employed, or a mixture of both, and then this kind of portfolio career can develop over time as well. Some people never want to, and they always want to. Well, I say just, but you know what I mean. See their clients on a one-to-one basis. But once you move into this place, as well as you say, that can really. But mindset can shift, can't it? And these other ideas come in, and you realise you're kind of free, and you can, as long as you get out of your own way, kind of thing, and have good connections and attachments to other people. I think
absolutely
you can develop all kinds of things over time, as I say, in the therapy world, even within the therapy world, actually.
And you can go. You're right. Use the word free, and there is a freedom to all of this that just gives so much pleasure, I think, to people once you start to realize. And if you are excited about what you're doing, and we talk about that passion that people have, and do something that is passionate, that you're passionate about, not that you think you should be doing, and then you just have that almost kind of snowball effect, of going down and saying, well, actually, I could do this, and I could do it. And it might start very closely aligned to what you were doing. And then you can start to talk about niches and micro niches, and how you really, drill down to what it is that gives you the joy. And that's, for me, is absolutely crucial. What is it that really, makes you happy, that you can then give up, and I say give up, that huge salary, the constraints of a career you've trained in, especially if you have a degree, for example, in it, to move forward, and then really enjoy that, the kind of the fruits of your labor of it all. And once they've done that, then we get to the next step, which is to overcome some of the barriers around that. And you will understand some of these, I am sure, more than I will. But there can be mental blocks to doing it. There can be physical blocks, financial blocks, social blocks. And again, the social one, I think, for me, is a really key one to try and understand and get through. You were a lawyer, you deal with doctors, nurses, teachers, who there is a societal pressure that these people should stay in the role they are in. I would argue that it is better to be happy in what you're doing than miserable in a career that you don't want to be in. I would prefer to be treated by a doctor who is happy in their work, than thinking about what they're doing if they ever get off shift, or that they're so tired they can't cope. Likewise, I'd want my children to be, educated by someone who is happy and thriving on what they're doing. And I think there is a lot of pressure and self-pressure as well. And I feel it. I had a degree. I spent a lot of time at university. I was lucky to get a bursary, but someone still paid for me to go. And I see it very much as an extension. Still now what I do is an extension of what I did at university. It's a world apart. Ultimately, I still help people. And that's the key. Again, trying to get people to understand and overcome that fear of change to be able to make the next steps.
But I made the change in my sort of mid-30s, and I think at that stage, a lot of people would probably have themselves be thinking, I can understand. They might be wanting out to wherever they were So it wasn't, I mean, when I think about the number of people who are still within law firms that would have been there when I left, there aren't going to be that many actually. So so it was a bit of a time for people generally, I suppose, of thinking about, is this what I want? But I did have somebody on YouTube actually post below a video, are you joking? Therapists earn, it was somebody in the US, very little. I don't know what environment they were in or what they were talking about, but how could you give up the amount that you spent on training to be a lawyer? But for me, I was a lawyer for 10 years. It would have significant value. When you talked about values there were skills which I will have developed then, which are very valuable now. A lot of people who have had have successful practices, and they were people that some of them came from corporate environments, because they're all the kind of organizational stuff, even the money, those sorts of drive was already developed. So there definitely were transferable skills. It's not completely different. It's the service industry as well, therapists are the same as lawyers. So yeah, it's not, I did get that a little bit, but not as much as probably as I thought I would. I think most people understand or have some appreciation of moving to a more vocational career. Actually, they can understand why at a particular level, I think. So I didn't have any direct criticism of it. And my wife, which was very important, she was very supportive. She'd done the same. She worked for a hedge fund, and then I think 2 years before she changed to she works as a teacher in a school. So actually I followed her in some ways into a different career. But so I think a partner is important, isn't it? And their response to it. I imagine that could be quite an obstacle.
Absolutely.
But in terms of parents and that kind of thing, if they'd said to me then, I don't think you should do it. Well, yeah.
Parents are I think a whole nother story. And will ultimately have best interests at heart, whether they say it or not. But you're right, partners is so key. You really need that support network around you. And you touched on it there. You said you didn't have as many people give negative feedback as you thought you may. And actually, again, that's a huge part of it. You dress it up and make it far worse for ourselves.
Definitely. I also don't remember people being spectacularly supportive. I don't mean in that, what could they do anyway? It was me that was leaving. It was me that doing it. So there was quite a thing of doing it on my own. I mean, certainly my partner would have been very supportive all the way, and people would have been encouraging. But fundamentally, it's you making that journey yourself, isn't it? Hence all these, what we're talking about here, and how important it is, and talking to other people making the journey as well, which is why this YouTube channel is around too for people. So,
And it's great that there are resources such as yourself, because I think it really does help. Again, it goes back to having that communication with people who've been through it, done the same, to help with that. And the validation. And that's the next step, actually, is the validation of your decisions. That's the V. That's the end of the Neovova.
Okay.
And that's the validation to kind of say, right, I've made these decisions. I've overcome my doubts, my family's doubts, my friends' doubts. Got the support of my partner, right? That's I'm now happy to validate that this is okay, and to speak to others again to make sure that you're making the right decision. Speak to people, because what we do is still a little bit out of the ordinary. The general consensus is that you work, you go to school, you have an education, college, university, whatever that looks like, and you work. Now, I think it's changed from my parents' generation, where they work forever in the same industry. I think that has changed. But I think there is still very much a feeling that you work in what you do. You don't really deviate too much. So people like you and I think, are the exception. It's becoming more and more. But it is still it's a little less. It's not the norm. So I think to have that validation from those that have done it, to have conversations with you, with me, with others, with our kind of other entrepreneurs, self-employed people, to really understand the nitty-gritty. And that's the bit. Go and get that confirmation of what you are doing. That it's right for you, right for what you want. And again, throughout all this process, if someone was to turn around to me and say, this isn't right, I think I'm done. I'm going to stick with what I'm doing, but thank you for your help, and maybe I will, I have a little segue somewhere. That's again, that's fine because it isn't for everyone.
Sure.
And plenty of people start, lots of businesses, small businesses fail, and there's lots of reasons for that. But I would always kind of err on the side of optimism with that.
Me too.
If you really want it to work, if you really have that passion, you will do anything.
Yeah.
And actually, I find myself now where I couldn't go back to employment. I was probably a pain in the backside to have as an employee anyway.
Right.
And now I understand that. Now I understand why, because there was always that burning, something else going on. And now I can never, if things got really, really bad, I would find a way through. And that's that change in mentality.
When you say about connecting with other people, how do you suggest people do that? I mean,
so I think there's so many options out there. I have a nice network of people who have already made this move. And again, part of the reason I'm writing the book is to pull some of that together so people can use the book as a reference and see that they are not alone. What was the journey that this person went on? And, people within the book come from various different professions. And for me, that was very important to be able to pick up on so people can see what's relative to them, what resonates with them. And obviously we all resonate with slightly different people. And there's a million and one different books out there as well where people can read and see, that people have moved on from where they started. And the advice, I'm sure you read a lot like I do. And it's just about pointing someone in the right direction that resonates with them.
With technology, you can connect with people all over the world. And yes, systems and maybe different US therapists, UK therapists, but as far as going from within a corporate environment to working for yourself, that's a human experience, isn't it? It's irrelevant what country somebody's in. It's a change in something for a human being, isn't it? That will be the same wherever, actually. Anxiety or fear or love or the same,
all of it,
country you're in. So yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And to have that global overview, I think for me and V&Over is very important as well, because you're right, there's that human side to it. And it doesn't matter what language you speak, where you come from. Everybody has very similar emotions, same sort of path. And that's why, although I specialize in healthcare, I will speak to anyone, because actually the journey is the same for many, many people. It's about, the final step with the V&Over process is taking action.
Okay.
And that is here's my resignation. Here's my whatever it takes to move on to that next step. Here's my registration with HMRC. Here's my self-employment. Whatever it happens to be, that actual definitive action to say, I am now committing to doing this. And how do I move forward? And constantly taking that action and starting that business. And then I can help them just start that first little bit of business off, talk about the finances, what do you need, website, etc. What can you do? What don't you need to do? And don't get stuck in the traps that I think some people do, and I probably fell foul of as well.
What kind of traps? What do you mean?
I think a classic one that people fall into is, I need a logo.
Oh, okay.
That's the very kind of basics. If I'm going to start a business, I need a logo. Go and pay someone a lot of money, and things like that are a website. There's so many options to do it free. What can you do to make it, to take action? And I'm a really strong believer in doing something over nothing. And I think all of this really culminates in that action, the personal exit plan, to say, right, here is what's going to happen. This is the steps I'm going to take, because it's easy to then fall back. Because it's easy to fall back into what we're comfortable with and what we're comfortable doing. So just keep that momentum moving forward.
Yes, and I think, as you say, something like a website, you can spend a lot of money, but there are free, and they look good, don't they?
Absolutely.
Template with therapists as well. I started with a website which was relatively inexpensive. I did get somebody to do a bit of design for it, but I didn't need to. It would have been, you pay for the hosting, but otherwise it was quite easy to do. And then, of course, a few years down the line, when your business is more established, your income, then I get somebody else to come in, redesign it, and do a great logo.
And that's great, and you should, right? Branding is everything, but is that take cleaning company, for example. You
Sure.
don't need, you don't need anything overly fancy to get going with that. You just
No.
need to
Yeah.
pick up the pace, find some clients, then
Yeah.
you can get them. And it's just, that constant feedback into what you're doing and how to move, especially in those early days. If you've quit your job, you're doing something completely different, you need to have that momentum to keep going because it's
Sure.
hard. And
it's
so
taking action, as you say, isn't it? I mean, even on looking at a YouTube channel, actually, I remember somebody saying people think about recording videos that they need a lot of expensive equipment and cameras and all that kind of thing. But the people that I saw that had started, they just said, when you look at their early videos, they're in their kitchen, they picked up their phone, they record it, and you press a button and up it goes to YouTube. I mean, as a therapist, it can't just be any old thing, of course, but well, for anybody, it can't. But I think we might make much more of something in some ways. I think it needs to be much more money invested, at least initially, than it needs to. It's actually just taking action and doing something, isn't it? And then things will often come from that.
absolutely. And we're in an exciting time for that. And I think that's what really keeps me passionate and going, is that we live in an age where all of this is possible. Camera phones, Zoom, all these bits and pieces where people you can start something right here, right now.
Yeah.
But it's just finding that the beginning to the end and how helping people through that journey to actually make the action and stop thinking about making a YouTube video and making it.
Yeah, I mean, it's about, the book. I self-published my book, actually, and it was because I downloaded a book on something, addiction, and then there was another one there for £2, which somebody had written, which I don't know, was 1,500 words, or maybe a bit more than that, but for a few thousand words long. I could just tell they were just tapped away. Is it Amazon? Yeah, provide their software that it puts it into a way that you can upload it as a book, and that self-published book can be there the next day for a price. It's amazing. You don't have to get a publishing contract. I mean, people of course do with academic therapy books and other books, but
of course,
you can really do whatever you want with technology now, can't you? You then have to get people to buy it, but I did, and it was some guy just saying what he thought about a particular niche in addiction. But that was the thing that made me think, I could do that. It was somebody who just gave it a go. Yeah.
And exactly. I think just doing something. You're passionate about what you're doing and you can write something. It's the same with LinkedIn articles, a book, YouTube videos. If you're passionate about what you're doing, it makes it so much easier to be able to move forward and just do it.
Yeah.
And you know that what you say is right, and it might be right, it might be wrong, and someone might disagree with you, but that's good. Getting out there and it's finding those bits. And I think through the V&Over process and this personal exit plan, people find that and find that they are able to understand that there is a world out there that's very different to maybe where they've come from.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've taken us through that. Is there any particular advice? I mean, you've given advice in some ways, but any particular advice you give to somebody, it could be a therapist or anybody who's looking to make that transition?
I think the biggest advice that I would give someone is if you are genuinely feeling that you can no longer work where you are, that you're stuck in a career, that you're dissatisfied, unfulfilled, maybe lying awake at night thinking, there's more, there is something else here, is really to take that first step. Reach out to someone like you, like me, who's done it. Ask some questions and see if you really want to do it. Have a conversation with someone that runs their own business. Probably the first thing to do, and see what they say. And when they're talking, if you are excited about what they're doing, then I would say find someone else like me, like V&Over, to do the next steps, to take you forward, but take some action and have that conversation with someone. Is it really for me? Because it isn't for everyone. It is a super hard thing to do. And I think that's I have very frank conversations with people to start with, that this is going to be hard on lots of levels. And you need to know that you are excited about it. If there's any of it that you have a hang up about let's talk through it. But when we've talked through it and we've had those conversations, if you're still not feeling right, then maybe it isn't for you. But as you were talking to the person, let's say you found someone that has started their own consultancy, their own clinic. If you have ideas buzzing around your head as they are talking, then I think you are on the right track to make that change. And don't sit and feel sad, lonely about what you're doing and the career you're in if it's not what you want to do.
Sure.
I think, again, I'd say I talked about it, I've written about it, but I think some careers are built on a fault line where it isn't the right thing, but you've done it because for whatever reason. But 10, 15 years down the line, that might be a very different you. And I think it's really important that people accept that, acknowledge it, and are able to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And the other thing as well, I think if people are thinking about reaching out to people, if somebody is doing something which they love and built up a bit, they will often be happy to talk about it to some degree as well, won't they? You know, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's not like another thing to do when you work in a big company that you've got to talk to somebody else, or I had to. What did I train? As much as I love trainees, you know, you'd have to mentor trainees as part of the job description. That kind of thing is different, I think, isn't it? Talking to somebody who, when you do something that you love and gives you meaning and fulfillment, still sacrifice of time and that kind of thing to bear in mind. But most people probably will be happy to talk to somebody about it and about their experience.
Absolutely, and speak to a range of people.
Yeah,
find different careers, different outlets to speak to, and you absolutely hit the nail on the head. If someone is happy in what they're doing, passionate what they're doing, find the time.
Yeah.
And I would encourage someone on LinkedIn, reach out to someone that you don't know and ask them. You can do that. It's an easy, you know, I think it's the easiest thing to do. And it's that action is find someone in a career that you might be interested in and ask how they got into it, what they like, what a day looks like. And actually,
what are the challenges, I suppose, all those things, isn't it? People will often tell you that as well, of course. They'll tell you what.
And find out the challenges. And I think that's a measure. I would be happy to share some of the challenges if someone asked me. I think you know, that's key. If you ask anyone if they have any challenges and they say no, I would see that as a red flag.
Yeah.
I would be very wary because, you know, any entrepreneur will have problems and challenges.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to tell you my innermost secrets. You know,
but that was next. What are your innermost secrets, Dave?
We haven't got time.
You're right, we haven't.
It's nearly Christmas.
On that note, we are about at time. We have sort of run out of time, but thank you so much. I think it's really, I mean, of course, it's a general model, isn't it? But I think it's going to be really helpful in lots of the things you've said there for people who are thinking about the career change. So thank you. Really appreciate your time. We'll put links below the video to
fabulous.
Your website or that kind of thing. Anything you want me to link it to. I think you said you've recorded a video on YouTube as well about.
I've taken that action myself. Brilliant. I have a video. There will be more.
Okay, so you can we'll put those details below the video as well.
Amazing. Thank you, and I really appreciate you and reaching out to me, and great to chat with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a very nice Christmas.
You too.